there's a text you've probably sent before. Hey, so sorry, not feeling great tonight. Can we rain check? And the second you hit send, something happens. You don't feel guilty. You feel relieved, like a window just opened in a room that was getting too small. And here's the thing, you weren't even sick. If that sounds familiar, stay with me. Because what's happening in that moment isn't weakness. It isn't avoidance. It isn't some personality flaw you need to fix. It's actually something psychologists have been studying for decades. And the findings might change how you think about yourself entirely. Nearly 70% of people, when given the choice, would genuinely rather spend a Friday night at home. 70%. And yet we live in a culture that has somehow convinced the majority of us that we are the problem, that the person who loves their couch more than the club is missing something, is falling behind, is living less. Today, we're going to take that apart, carefully, honestly, and without the self-help cliches. Here's something most people don't know about their own brain. Your nervous system has a preferred level of stimulation. Think of it like a thermostat that was set before you could walk. For some people, the thermostat runs cool. They need external heat, noise, movement, social energy. Without it, they feel flat, underwhelmed, a little dead inside. Those are your extroverts, and they're not wrong for needing that. Their nervous system is just calibrated differently. But for a significant portion of people, and research strongly supports this, the thermostat runs warm. Their nervous system is already humming at a higher base level. And adding more input doesn't energize them. It overloads them. Psychologists call this optimal arousal. The idea that we each have a threshold for stimulation, and functioning beyond that threshold doesn't feel exciting. It feels like too much. It feels like a crowded room when you just wanted a quiet corner. This isn't introversion, exactly. It's not shyness. It's not social anxiety. It's just how your nervous system is wired. And home, with its controlled light, its familiar sounds, its total absence of strangers making small talk. Home is the one environment where that system finally exhales. Now here's where it gets really specific. Think about the people who work in customer service, or nursing, or teaching, or any job where you spend 8 hours being patient, helpful, emotionally available, and professionally cheerful. You're managing other people's stress, answering questions you've answered 1,000 times, keeping your voice steady when you're running on empty, and then you get home, and something shifts. Not just tiredness, something deeper. Like a version of yourself that had to wait all day finally gets to come out. One person described it this way. They spend all day in the hospital giving emotional energy to patients, to families, to coworkers. By 6 p.m., they have nothing left, and going out afterward, even to something supposedly fun, doesn't refill them. It just costs more. Home is the only place where the transaction stops. That's not dramatic. That's actually what's happening neurologically. Every social interaction, even a pleasant one, requires your brain to do real work. Reading faces, calibrating your tone, managing the impression you're making. It's continuous labor, and it's invisible. Home is where you clock out of that labor, and for some people, clocking out isn't optional. It's maintenance. And it's not just about energy. It's that a lot of social interaction doesn't even feel real. Think about the last time someone said, "We should hang out soon." And you both knew, in that exact moment, that it was never going to happen. Or the work colleague who asks, "How are you?" while already walking past. Or the friend who says, "I'll call you," and neither of you expects the phone to ring. People who love staying home are often the ones who notice this most clearly. They're not antisocial. They're just done performing. They've spent enough time in rooms full of scripted exchanges. The polite laughs, the recycled small talk, the enthusiasm manufactured for someone else's comfort. And at some point, they quietly decided, if the connection isn't real, the cost isn't worth it. Psychologists call this a low tolerance for performative interaction. And it doesn't come from cynicism. It comes from having a finely tuned sense of what genuine connection actually feels like, and being unwilling to settle for the hollow version. Home is where you don't have to perform. You don't have to laugh at the right moment, or keep your voice warm when you're exhausted, or pretend you care about a conversation that's already over before it started. That freedom, the freedom from required inauthenticity, is something most people have never fully named. But people who love staying home feel it every single day. And then there's something about the way they connect, even when they want to. People who love staying home aren't people who don't want connection. They just want it on different terms. A long message instead of a phone call they weren't prepared for. One person over coffee instead of a group dinner where everyone talks but nobody really says anything. A conversation that starts when they're ready, not when someone else decides to knock. There's a reason texting feels easier than calling for a lot of these people. It's not avoidance. It's the ability to think before responding, to choose words carefully, to show up fully, instead of performing presence while their nervous system is quietly overwhelmed. Low-pressure connection isn't less connection. For many people, it's the only kind that actually reaches them. But here's the part that rarely gets talked about. People who love staying home are not doing nothing. They're doing something very specific. They've quietly built a life made of rituals. Small, precise, personal ones that the outside world would probably walk past without noticing. The morning coffee that's actually sat with, not grabbed on the way out the door. The afternoon light that comes through the window at a certain angle in a certain season. The spot on the couch that's been yours long enough that it's shaped slightly differently. The comfort show you can put on without having to justify why you love it to someone who's never seen it. The book you're reading at 11 p.m. that nobody told you to read. These aren't substitutes for a real life. They are the texture of a real life, just a quieter one. Research on what psychologists call low stimulation preference suggests that people who find genuine joy in domestic rituals tend to score higher in creativity, introspection, and emotional depth. Not because staying home makes you more creative, but because people with rich inner lives are naturally drawn to environments where that inner life can actually exist without being interrupted every 5 minutes by someone else's needs. But here's the part most people get completely wrong about people who stay home. They assume it's avoidance. That something is missing. Ambition, courage, social skill. What they don't see is the architecture underneath. The grocery delivery that's been optimized. The remote work setup that actually works. The social calendar trimmed down to 3 people who matter instead of 20 who don't. The life quietly engineered to remove everything that costs energy without returning anything real. This isn't laziness, this is competence. People who love staying home have often become extraordinarily good at building a life that doesn't require them to perform constantly just to function. They've looked at what the outs world demands. The commute, the small talk, the events attended out of obligation, and they've made a different calculation. Why spend energy on low-return interactions when the same energy, kept and used differently, produces something that actually feels like living? The outside world calls this avoidance. People who've done it call it efficiency. And their minds don't go quiet when the house does. A problem that's been circling for days suddenly clears while they're washing dishes. An idea arrives somewhere between folding laundry and making tea. Not because they were trying, but because they finally had enough space to think. Hands busy, mind free. That's not wasted time. That's how some people are built. And then there's the thing that people almost never say out loud. Getting older changes this. A lot of people notice it somewhere in their 30s, 40s, sometimes sooner. The social energy that used to feel effortless just costs more now. The party that seemed fun at 25 feels like homework at 38. And somewhere along the way, you stopped pretending it didn't. You stopped going because you felt like you should and started going only when you actually wanted to. And quietly, your life got better. One person who'd been a confirmed homebody their entire life said something that stayed with me. They were in their late 70s. They said they'd spent years in their 20s forcing themselves to go out, matching other people's energy, showing up to things that drained them, because they thought that was what living looked like. And then they stopped. And they said they have never been happier, never once regretted it. How many years do people spend performing extroversion, exhausting themselves into a version of their life that doesn't fit? Not everyone arrived here the same way. Some came home to empty houses after school and found unexpectedly that the quiet felt like freedom. No one watching, no one asking, no schedule waiting. Others grew up surrounded by noise and people, but somehow still alone in the ways that mattered. They learned early that being in a crowd doesn't mean being seen. Either way, something gets built. A relationship with your own company that most people never develop. A capacity to be alone without the ache of loneliness. And a very clear sense of what home actually means. Not just a place to sleep, but the one environment where you don't have to negotiate your own existence. Now, and this is important, there's a difference between solitude and hiding. And most people who love staying home know exactly which one they're doing, even if they don't always want to admit it. Solitude is chosen. It fills you up. You come out of it more yourself, not less. You're not avoiding something, you're moving towards something. Stillness, clarity, the rare experience of just being without needing to perform. Loneliness is different. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not being able to reach it. A person can be surrounded by people and feel it completely. And a person can be alone in a quiet house on a Saturday and feel none of it at all. But there's a third thing, and this is the honest part. Sometimes staying home is protection, not from boredom or noise, but from something that hurt. A friendship that ended badly, a period where the outside world felt too sharp, too loud, too much. And the house became the one place where you didn't have to explain yourself. That's worth noticing, not with judgment, because protecting your peace is genuinely a form of wisdom, but with honesty, because there's a version of home that nourishes and a version that just insulates. One is a choice. The other is a habit you haven't examined in a while. Here's one more thing most people don't realize about people who love staying home. They've stopped needing the outside world to tell them they're living right. They don't post a photo to prove the evening was worth it. They don't collect experiences to show someone else. They don't measure a good week by how many events they attended or how full the calendar looked. Their sense of a life well lived comes from somewhere internal, a quiet, private ledger that no one else can see or grade. This isn't arrogance, and it isn't isolation. It's something rarer, a self-worth that doesn't depend on external confirmation. Most people, if they're honest, derive at least some sense of being okay from outside signals. The likes, the invitations, the visible proof that others approve of how they're spending their time. People who genuinely love staying home have built something most people don't even know is possible. A way of knowing, quietly and privately, that this evening was good, that this life is theirs, without needing anyone else to confirm it. In a culture that runs on visibility, document everything, share everything, prove you're living. That's a quiet kind of freedom most people don't even know they're missing. Here's what I think is the thing most people who love staying home have and almost never get credit for. They can be with themselves, actually with themselves, not scrolling to escape their own thoughts, not filling the silence with noise because the quiet makes them uncomfortable. They can sit in a room alone and feel, not nothing, but something real, something that doesn't need an audience. Psychologists call this self-companionship, and research suggests it's genuinely rare. Most people find sustained solitude deeply uncomfortable. Their default is to reach for external input, the phone, the TV, another person. Not because those things are bad, but because being alone with your own mind requires a kind of tolerance that most of us were never taught. The people who love staying home, they've built that tolerance. Whether by nature or by choice or by necessity, they know how to keep themselves company. They notice things. The sigh someone is trying to hide. The message someone decided not to send. The quiet shift in someone's tone that tells you more than the words did. Because when you're not constantly filling space with noise, you start to actually hear things. That makes you a different kind of attentive, a different kind of present. Not less connected, just more deliberate about when and how you connect. So, if you're someone who cancels plans and exhales, who finds a perfect Saturday in a quiet room with a warm drink and zero obligations? Who measures a good week in the quality of a few real moments rather than the quantity of events? You're not missing out. You're not smaller for it. You're not behind. The world is very loud about what a good life looks like. But a lot of that loudness is just noise. And you, more than most people, already know the difference. If this felt like someone finally said the thing you've been thinking for years, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below. Are you someone who genuinely loves being home? Or did this make you think of someone you know? Tell me. And if you want more of this, the kind of content that actually tries to understand how people think, not just tell them how to feel, subscribe. New videos every week. I'll see you in the next one.